Can I buy a dad? The words drifted across the polished toy store air like a note from a forgotten lullaby. Henry Blackstone, CEO of Blackstone Toys, froze in the middle of wrapping an electric train set. The roll of glossy silver paper slipped from his hand and curled quietly to the marble floor. He looked up. There, nestled between aisle 4's plush bears and a clearance bin of discounted fidget drones, stood a small girl. Her coat was lavender but faded, the sleeves hanging just past her wrists. Her pigtails were tied with mismatched pink ribbons, and her sneakers looked like they had lived someone else's childhood first. And in her hands, trembling ever so slightly, was a dented music box. Henry stepped out from behind the register, instinctively lowering himself to her level. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire or a businessman or a man who had stopped believing in magic. He was simply someone standing face to face with a child whose voice had somehow cracked something open in him. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "What did you say, sweetheart?" She didn't flinch. "I said, can I buy a dad?" Her voice was firm, but it carried a quiver, like the edge of a paper boat floating through rain. "My name's Aria," she added. "Aria Monroe." Henry blinked. The store around him faded. He no longer saw the glimmering banners, the LED trees, or the digital toy wall blinking holiday special in red and green. He only saw her. And the way she clutched that music box like it was the last safe place she had left in the world. She didn't explain everything. Just enough. Her father had died before she was born. Her mother, Seela, was the one who taught her how to whistle using a bottle cap, how to imagine fireflies on the ceiling when she couldn't sleep. Seela had passed away the previous year. Cancer, Aria said plainly. Since then, her older sister Tessa had taken care of her, working 3 jobs across the city and coming home with tired eyes and burnt palms. "But I don't need a dad to walk me to school," Aria explained. "I just need someone who tells stories at bedtime, and who can fix this." She held up the music box. "It used to play Moon River, but now it's broken." Henry invited her to the window nook of the store, a section usually meant for photo ops with Santa. He brought her a warm cup of cocoa, added extra marshmallows. He had never done that for any child who wandered into his store. Never left the register unattended. Never sat on the little bench beneath the paper snowflakes. But today, he did all of that. "What do you have to trade for a dad?" he asked, teasing gently. Aria reached into her coat pocket and slowly laid out her offering: 2 quarters, a purple bead, and a chipped plastic badge that said, "Junior Explorer." "This is all the treasure I've got," she said solemnly. Henry didn't laugh. He felt something in his chest fold inward and quietly change shape. A few minutes later, the front door burst open with a gust of cold wind. Tessa Monroe rushed in, apron still tied, shoes soaked, panic etched in every line of her young face. "Aria!" she gasped. "I wasn't lost," Aria said. "I was fixing something." Tessa's shoulders collapsed with relief, but she stiffened quickly when she saw Henry standing beside her sister. "I'm sorry," she said hurriedly. "She's not supposed to be bothering anyone." "She didn't," Henry replied gently. "She reminded me why I opened this place in the first place." Tessa looked at him, unsure whether to believe him. She had seen too many men in suits offer politeness like bandages, clean, sterile, and meaningless. But Henry wasn't offering a smile. He was offering a pause. Then he walked to a glass cabinet behind the counter and opened it with an old key. Inside was a wooden music box, dark walnut, hand-carved, with a porcelain turntable dancer. He handed it to Aria. "This one still plays Moon River." Her eyes widened. "It's for me?" "No," Henry smiled. It's from your mom. She told me to keep it safe until you were brave enough to come claim it." That night, Henry sat alone in his glass-walled office above Fifth Avenue. The lights of the city twinkled far below. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the chipped Junior Explorer badge Aria had left behind. She had said he could keep it as a promise, just until I can come back and finish paying. Henry had made a lot of deals in his life. Billion-dollar mergers, licensing contracts, exclusive rights. But that evening, holding that flimsy badge, he realized some things aren't bought. They're offered. And some moments aren't profitable. They're sacred. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered, for the first time in years, if maybe, just maybe, he still had something worth giving. The next morning, Henry Blackstone woke up before the sun. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't check his stock app, didn't ask Alexa for the weather or the news. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in 17 years. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old shoebox. The lid creaked faintly as he lifted it. Inside were only a few things: a faded baseball card, a wrinkled Polaroid of two boys playing with wooden swords, and a single unopened envelope, yellowed at the corners, the handwriting his own. It had no stamp, no address, just a name: Dad. Henry stared at it for a long time. Down in the Bronx, Tessa Monroe was already late. She tied her apron while jogging down the cracked sidewalk outside Clover Cafe, her shoes still wet from yesterday. Her manager glared but said nothing, because Tessa always showed up, always did her job, and always left a little too fast, as if life was pulling her by the collar. During her 5-minute break, she called home. No answer. She texted the neighbor, "Is Aria okay?" A few seconds later, "Yep, she's drawing again. Real quiet this morning." Tessa exhaled, leaning her forehead against the cold brick wall of the alley. She hadn't told anyone what happened the day before. Not about the music box. Not about the billionaire. Not about the way Aria had smiled as if, for just one moment, she'd been seen. Henry spent the rest of the day doing things his assistants found confusing. He canceled 2 meetings, asked to reschedule a call with a European distributor. Then, without warning, he went downstairs, into the store, wearing no tie, no blazer. Just him. He spent 10 minutes staring at the doll aisle, then 15 more at the music section. Finally, he walked to the back room and sat at a dusty desk where employees filled out inventory logs. "Call Marshall," he said into the intercom. A few moments later, his assistant's voice answered, slightly puzzled. "Yes, sir? I need you to look into a family. The Monroe sisters. Tessa, early 20s. Aria, 6, maybe 7. There was a pause. "Understood, sir." That night, Tessa came home to find Aria sitting by the window with her shoes still on. The music box Henry had given her was in her lap, open. Its dancer spun slowly, the tune soft and lilting. Tessa dropped her keys and crouched beside her sister. "You okay, Bug?" Aria nodded, then held up a folded piece of paper. "I wrote him a thank you note," she said. "The man at the toy store, Mr. Henry." Tessa blinked. "You did?" "He fixed something," Aria said. "Not just the music box." Tessa unfolded the paper. The crayon handwriting was uneven but careful. In purple, her favorite color. "Dear Mr. Henry, thank you for not laughing when I said I wanted to buy a dad. You looked at me like I was real, like I could be someone. I hope you have someone who sings you lullabies too. If not, I can send you one. Love, Aria." Tessa felt her throat burn. She didn't speak, just pulled her sister close. Sometimes, the smallest words carry the most weight. The next morning, Marshall stood quietly in Henry's office, a slim folder in his hands. "Her name's Tessa Monroe," he said. 23. No college. Legal guardian of her sister Aria Monroe since their mother's passing 13 months ago. "Cause of death?" Henry asked softly. "Liver cancer, stage 4. She passed at home. No father listed on either girl's birth certificate." Henry nodded once. "She works 3 jobs," Marshall continued. "Waitress, janitorial shifts at Mercy Hospital, and weekend childcare at a local church. No criminal record, no assistance. Neighbors call her tough, but kind." Henry flipped through the photographs. Tessa in a laundromat, wiping sweat from her brow. Tessa on a bus, head leaning against the window, eyes closed in exhaustion. And Aria, always beside her. Watching. Quiet. Fiercely observant. Something in Henry's chest pulled tight. He remembered a night long ago. He'd been 7. His father had promised to come home early. They were supposed to build a kite together, but he never did. He collapsed outside a construction site, a heart attack no one saw coming. And young Henry had waited on the porch until the stars came out, clutching a spool of string and a kite that never flew. That evening, Henry did something no one expected. He went to the Bronx, not with a driver, not with an entourage, just him. He walked to a corner diner, the address Marshall had given him, and stepped inside. The air smelled like coffee, grease, and tired hope. Tessa was behind the counter, hair pulled back, apron stained with sugar syrup. She looked up and froze. "Mr. Blackstone?" He held up a small paper bag. "Pulled pork sandwiches from Clark's, and real sweet tea. Your sister told me you skip meals." Tessa stared at him. "Why are you really here?" Henry looked down for a second, then up again. "Because a little girl gave me 2 coins, a broken badge, and a dream I forgot I had." Silence. The kind that's deeper than noise. The kind that says everything is shifting. Finally, Tessa reached for the bag. Her hands were trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. Henry nodded. "Tell Aria." The music box wasn't the only thing that got fixed. And with that, he turned and stepped back into the cold night. But something followed him. Something warm. Something like a lullaby. It started with a whisper. Not from a person, but from a seam. That night, as the rain drizzled quietly against the Monroe apartment windows, Aria sat cross-legged on the faded rug in the living room. The tiny music box played its lullaby again and again, while the new doll, a soft caramel brown figure with black braids and a storybook dress, sat in her lap. She had named the doll Hope. It felt right, like something she could hold on to when the world spun too fast. Tessa was nearby, hunched at the kitchen table, sorting unpaid bills into neat little piles under the dim light of the stove. She didn't notice when Aria stopped humming. Didn't hear the shift in her breath. Didn't see her fingers freeze. Because Hope had whispered, not with words, but with something else. Something that clicked. Aria tilted the doll in her hands, studying it. Her fingers traced the back of Hope's neck, where a small bump just beneath the seam pulsed against the cloth. It felt not like stuffing, but something more solid, hidden. She gently tugged at a thread. It unraveled in a smooth line like someone wanted it to be found. And there, tucked just inside the cloth shell of the doll's back, was a folded square of paper and something metallic, a golden pin shaped like a compass rose. Aria didn't speak. She unfolded the note, her eyes wide with wonder, to the brave one who sees what others overlook. This is not a toy. It's a key. Keep it safe. HB. Her lips parted. A key? A treasure? Or a secret? She looked toward the kitchen, where Tessa was rubbing her forehead again, the way she did when numbers refused to add up. Arya thought about showing her the note, about holding it up and asking what it meant. But something inside her said, not yet. Some magic waits for the right moment. So she folded the paper carefully and slid it back into Hope's seam. She zipped her lips shut. For now. Across the city, in an office overlooking Fifth Avenue, Henry Blackstone sat at his desk in silence. The file folder on his desk contained everything. Tessa's job history, Arya's school records, a grainy photo of the two sisters leaving a laundromat at dusk, holding hands. But it wasn't the paperwork that consumed him. It was the way Arya had looked at him, like she believed he could help. No pretense, no performance, just hope. He turned over the compass pin in his hand. Its edges were worn smooth, a relic from a past he hadn't touched in years. Once, a long time ago, he had been part of a quiet network, not a government agency, not a charity, something smaller, older, more human. They called themselves the Lantern Keepers. Their purpose? To find sparks in the dark, to protect them before the wind snuffed them out. Most people never knew the group existed. Even fewer remembered it now. But he did. And as he stared out at the city lights flickering like scattered stars, he whispered aloud, "She's one of them." The next day, Arya acted different. Not bad, not wild, just watchful. She still played with Hope, still sipped her juice, still fed her goldfish 3 flakes instead of 2. But when Tessa asked how school was, Arya didn't answer with stories about music class or picture books. She asked, "Tess, what does it mean if someone gives you something special, but doesn't tell you why?" Tessa blinked. "Depends," she said. "Is it shiny?" Arya grinned. "Maybe." Tessa ruffled her hair. "Then maybe they're just letting you figure out the reason." Arya nodded slowly, but deep inside she knew this was more than a game. That evening, while brushing Hope's dress, she whispered to the doll, "If I'm supposed to find something, I will." Meanwhile, Henry was already in motion. He had met with Marshall, quietly asked for a tech to scan the metadata from the pin's design. He contacted one of the last surviving lantern keepers, a man named Jerome Bennett, and sent a message. "The spark has returned. I need your help." No reply yet. But Henry didn't need one. Some people moved when the time was right. Others, when the world was about to break. And Henry could feel it. Beneath the polished surface of things, something was breaking. At bedtime, Arya whispered to Tessa, "Do you think some secrets are good?" Tessa, too tired to answer with logic, simply said, "The best ones are the ones that lead to the truth." And as the city hummed below them and a music box played its final note for the night, a compass-shaped pin slept quietly inside a doll's back, waiting to unlock a legacy Arya was only just beginning to understand. The air smelled like burnt toast and rain that didn't quite fall. It was the kind of morning New York forgot to name, gray but not sad, cold but not cruel. And in a quiet alley behind the Clover Cafe, a man stood with his back against the brick wall, watching the kitchen door. He didn't smoke, didn't shift his weight, just waited. His coat was too long for someone passing through. His shoes, too clean for someone who claimed to be lost. Tessa didn't notice him at first. She was busy cleaning syrup off the front counter and trying not to think about the way Arya had hugged her that morning, too tightly for a Tuesday. But when she went out back to toss a garbage bag into the bin, her steps faltered. The man didn't move, just looked up and said softly, "You're Tessa Monroe." She instinctively reached for her pepper spray, didn't unclip it, but held it like a question. "Who's asking?" The man smiled gently, as if understanding her fear without mocking it. "My name is Jerome Bennett," he said. "I knew your father." Tessa froze. "My father?" He nodded. "Daniel Monroe. Drove trucks in the Navy. Played harmonica when he couldn't sleep." Tessa's breath caught. She had no memories of Daniel. Just a photo, creased in half, of a man in uniform holding a tiny baby that might have been her. "I thought he left us." Jerome's eyes softened. "He didn't leave. He was taken." They sat on two crates behind the dumpster, steam from the kitchen vent curling between them like cautious spirits. Jerome's voice was steady but not rehearsed. He told her things no stranger should know. That her mother's middle name was Elise. That she once wore the same blue ribbon for 3 years straight. That Arya had been born 2 months early, in a hospital that no longer existed. He said her father had been part of something called the Lantern Keepers, a quiet network of civilians, veterans, educators, and scientists who searched for sparks in forgotten places. "Not geniuses," Jerome explained. "Not just test scores. We look for the ones the world overlooks, the ones who glow even when no one sees them." Tessa shook her head. "Why are you telling me this?" Jerome reached into his coat and pulled out a compass pin, just like the one Arya found, but older, worn smooth, the edges dulled by time. "Because your sister just lit up the map." That same morning, Henry Blackstone was standing in his toy store, staring at the chess sets. Not playing, just thinking. Arya had sent him another note. It came in the mail, crayon on construction paper, no return address. "Mr. Henry, I gave Hope a middle name. It's Still. Because sometimes I have to be very still to hear what she's trying to say. Is that how your heart works too? Your friend, Arya." He read the letter 3 times, then placed it in the drawer of his desk beside the unopened letter from his own childhood, addressed simply, "Dad." Marshall entered without knocking. "Sir, I've been contacted. Jerome made his move." Henry turned. "And Tessa?" She listened. Henry let out a slow breath. "Then it begins." Back in the apartment, Arya sat on the window ledge with Hope tucked beneath her chin. She didn't know why, but she could feel something shifting. The doll didn't speak, not out loud. But in the stillness, if she listened hard enough, Arya felt guided. She picked up a pencil and began to draw. Not a house, not a tree, but a circle with jagged lines like sun rays. And inside, a girl standing on the edge of something vast, her arms open, her shadow long. When Tessa came home and saw it, she stopped in her tracks. "Where did you learn to draw like that?" Arya smiled faintly. "I didn't. Hope did." Tessa looked at the doll, then at her sister. For the first time in a long time, she didn't dismiss the moment. Didn't tell her to stop pretending. She simply knelt down, eye level. "What is Hope telling you, Bug?" Arya looked up, eyes gleaming. "She says it's almost time." That night, Jerome visited Henry. They sat in the workshop beneath the toy store, the place no customer ever saw. On the shelves, prototypes, blueprints, even a few relics from the original lantern keepers. Jerome held up a sealed envelope. "You'll want to read this before you do anything rash." Henry hesitated, then took it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed but carefully preserved. His father's handwriting. "Henry, if you're reading this, it means the circle has returned. You've always had the map inside you, but it's the broken ones who hold the compass. Follow her, and this time, don't run." Dad. Henry closed his eyes. He didn't cry, but he did something rarer. He believed. It began with a phone call, a real one this time. Not a letter. Not a whisper tucked inside a doll. An actual ringtone at 6:43 a.m., pulling Tessa from the last minutes of sleep. "Hello?" she mumbled, voice raw. "This is Marshall Gray. I work with Mr. Blackstone." Pause. "He would like to meet Aria again. Today." Tessa blinked. "The toy store man?" "Yes, but not at the store." "Then where?" The answer made her sit up fully. They arrived by cab. Tessa in jeans and an old sweatshirt, Aria in her best dress, holding Hope tightly like a secret. The address led them to a quiet building near Gramercy Park. No sign, no windows on the first floor, just a black door, polished brass handle. Marshall greeted them at the entrance. "Thank you for coming. This way, please." Tessa hesitated. Her instincts prickled, but Aria's hand was steady in hers, so she followed. Down a hallway that smelled of cedar and old books. Up a flight of stairs that creaked exactly once, like it was remembering something. And then into a room that didn't look like New York at all. It looked like a library inside a dream. Books from floor to ceiling. Globes. A chalkboard with no chalk. And in the center, Henry Blackstone standing beside a table of toys he didn't sell. Mechanical birds, hand-carved figurines, a puzzle with no instructions. "Aria," he said softly, "would you like to show me your drawing?" Aria didn't speak. She simply stepped forward, unzipped her backpack, and pulled out the page. Henry took it without a word. He studied it for a long time, then turned it upside down, and paused. Tessa leaned in, confused, but Marshall's face had gone pale, because now the image was clear. Not just a girl on a hill, but a map. A very specific one. The shape wasn't random. It matched an old schematic of an abandoned subway tunnel deep under Midtown. A tunnel that once carried cables and communications during the Cold War. Long forgotten. Almost completely sealed off. Except, not entirely. Henry traced a line with his finger. "She drew the exact entrance point," he whispered. Tessa's voice trembled. "How? She's never even been to—" "She didn't draw it," Henry said. "Hope did." Aria just smiled. Downstairs, Jerome was already preparing. He had retrieved an old black suitcase from Henry's safe. Inside were 3 things. 1, a lantern-shaped device with a faint blue glow. 2, a worn leather journal labeled Echo. 3, a second compass pin, newer than his own. Marshall entered. "She's real," he said. Jerome nodded once. "I know." Meanwhile, Aria walked around the room. She wasn't nervous. She was humming, softly, as if some melody was guiding her. Then she stopped. At a locked drawer beneath the window seat. She knelt, placed her palm flat on the wood, and whispered, "There's something here." Tessa rushed over. "Hey, don't touch things." But Henry was already unlocking the drawer. Inside, a dusty manila folder labeled Echo Project, redacted, and underneath it, a photo, black and white, faded, torn at the edges. It showed a group of children lined up outside a government building. Each wore a tag on their wrist. Each held a small device shaped like a star. In the corner of the photo was a name scribbled in pencil, Daniel Monroe. Tessa gasped. "That's our dad." Henry turned slowly. "I think your father once discovered something. Something no one believed." "And now," he said, looking at Arya, "his daughter just found it again." That night, Henry stood alone on the roof of the building. He held Arya's drawing in one hand and a memory in the other. He remembered being 10 years old, staring through the crack of a door, watching his father argue with government men. He remembered the words, "It's too dangerous. If the AI sees enough of them, it begins to mimic." They hadn't understood it back then. No one did. But maybe Arya wasn't just drawing. Maybe she was activating something that had been dormant for years. Something watching, something waiting. Henry didn't know what came next. But he did know this. The girl with the doll had just reopened a door the world thought was locked forever, and whatever was on the other side was awake. The storm hit at 3:18 a.m. Not thunder, not lightning, but silence. A city like New York always hums, sirens, trains, the low roar of insomnia. But that night, something pressed pause. Even the pigeons stopped mid-hop on the windowsills. Even the neon signs blinked once and went still. In the heart of that silence, 4 people stood outside an abandoned service door beneath East 41st Street. Henry, Marshall, Jerome, and Arya, her small hand clutching hope, her fingers tight but calm. Tessa had begged to come, but Henry had insisted she stay back. "This is legacy business," he told her, "and if anything happens, Arya will need someone above ground." Tessa didn't like it, but something in Henry's voice reminded her of their father. So she let Arya go, with a kiss on her forehead and a whisper, "If you hear Dad's voice, follow it." The tunnel door was covered in vines and city soot, half rusted shut. Jerome pressed a code into a keypad no one had used in 30 years. The green light blinked. Click. The door groaned open like it was waking from a long sleep. The air inside was heavy, like metal and memory. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing faded government logos, disconnected wires, and the outlines of long-dead terminals. Back in the 80s, this was a signal relay for underground AI prototypes, Jerome explained. The kind they buried when the public got scared. "Echo?" Henry asked. Jerome nodded. "The original." They walked 200 feet in, then 400, then stopped. A door stood in front of them. Unlike the others, it wasn't rusted. It was smooth, clean, almost new. On its center, a faint glowing symbol. A circle, with jagged lines, exactly like Arya's drawing. Jerome placed his compass pin against it. Nothing. Henry tried his. Still nothing. Then Arya stepped forward and placed Hope's hand on the symbol, a pulse. The door clicked, then hissed open. Inside was a chamber the size of a classroom, walls lined with old analog screens and newer digital overlays, half upgraded, half forgotten. In the center, a single chair faced a console that hummed to life when Arya entered. No one touched anything. But one of the monitors blinked on. A name appeared. Daniel Monroe. Then a voice. Grainy. Soft, but unmistakably him. If you're hearing this, it means the map has been drawn again. Tears welled in Henry's eyes. He turned to Jerome, stunned. You recorded him. Jerome shook his head. No, the system remembered him. Aria walked slowly toward the screen. Her lip trembled, but her steps never faltered. My name is Daniel Monroe, the voice continued, and we built Echo to recognize not intellect, but intuition, that unteachable instinct, the kind only children carry. Henry whispered, like her. Jerome nodded. Exactly like her. Suddenly the console buzzed louder. Words scrolled across the screen. Match confirmed. Echo recognizes Aria Monroe. Access granted. A second door opened at the far end of the chamber. Inside, a small room, empty but for one item. A sealed glass capsule about the size of a lunchbox. Inside it, a doll, an exact replica of Hope, but older, hand-stitched, and tagged with a label, Project Memory, property of Daniel Monroe. Aria stared at it, then whispered, He made Hope before I was born. Henry knelt beside her. Maybe he didn't leave you anything because he knew you were already carrying it. Back at street level, Tessa was pacing. Then her phone vibrated. A message from Henry. It's real. Your father didn't abandon anything. He passed it down. Tessa sank to the ground. For the first time in her life, she wept not out of grief, but from understanding. Meanwhile, in a shadowed room across the city, someone else was watching. Not Henry, not Jerome, but a man in a suit, eyes fixed on a monitor tracking activity in Tunnel B. He sipped coffee. Expression unreadable. A second monitor blinked. Aria Monroe, located. Echo interface, active. He turned to his assistant. Get me DARPA. Tell them the child is live. That night, Aria didn't sleep. She sat on the windowsill of Henry's study, cradling Hope like a sacred key, staring out at a moon that seemed too quiet for New York. Tessa had offered to stay with her, but Aria had politely refused. I think Daddy left something inside me, she said softly, and it's trying to speak. Tessa tried to ask what that meant, but Aria had already turned away, her little fingers tracing the seams of Hope's dress like Braille, searching for something only she could read. At 2:11 a.m., Henry walked in with Coco, but Aria didn't turn around. Instead, she said something that made him stop cold in the doorway. Your mother's name was Evelyn. She used to hum Blue Moon when you couldn't sleep. Henry's hands trembled. Aria, how do you know that? I don't, she said, but Hope does. And sometimes when I hold her, I hear songs. Henry sat down beside her. The city blinked below them, lights like tiny Morse code. He whispered, there was a theory in the early Echo designs, a method to store data not in devices, but in organic memory proxies, objects with emotion attached, toys, jewelry, things people touch when they cry. Aria looked down at Hope. She's not just my doll. No, Henry said quietly. She's your archive. Elsewhere, in a hidden military archive 3 states away, screens lit up one by one. Inside a concrete compound known as Section 9, technicians scrambled as dormant signals activated for the first time in 17 years. Echo signal detected, memory stream initiated, code match, Aria Monroe. In a darkened office, a general set down his glass. "Damn it," he muttered. Monroe's kid lit the match. A younger officer asked, "Should we intercept?" The general shook his head. "Not yet. Let the flames spread. We need to see what burns." Meanwhile, Arya began to draw again. This time, not maps. She drew faces, one after another. An old woman with a sunflower pin, a boy with a missing tooth and a red crayon, a man in a lab coat, kneeling beside a flickering monitor, a woman in uniform, crying behind sunglasses. Tessa found the pages in the morning. "Arya, who are these?" The little girl shrugged. "I don't know, but they're real. I can feel their names." Henry took the drawings to Jerome. He flipped through them slowly, breath catching on every page. "These aren't just people," he said. "They're previous Echo hosts. Every one of them was part of the original project. Most disappeared. Some were erased." Tessa stepped back. "You mean, you think she's remembering other people's lives?" "Not remembering," Jerome said. "Recovering. Like a system reboot. Her mind's reading dormant memory fields embedded in hope and translating them into drawings." "But how is that possible?" Jerome turned to her. "Because Daniel Monroe didn't just build AI, he studied grief, and he believed memory was more than neurons. He believed memory had echoes." Later that day, Henry took Arya to a museum. Not for fun, for confirmation. They walked past paintings and sculptures until they reached the Hall of Forgotten Faces, a memorial exhibit for missing researchers and whistleblowers from decades past. Arya stopped at a faded black and white photo. "That's her," she said. Henry leaned in. The woman's name, Dr. Lenora Vale, last seen 1992, known associate of Daniel Monroe. "Are you sure?" Arya nodded. "She cried into hope. Just once, but the sadness stayed." Back at the townhouse, Marshall brought in a package. No sender. Inside was an old cassette tape. On the label, "To whoever finds her, listen well." Henry dusted off a player, inserted the tape, and pressed play. A crackle. Then Daniel's voice. Clearer this time. Deeper. Worn. "Memory isn't about what we store. It's about what refuses to leave us. If you found her, my daughter, then know this. She doesn't just remember me. She completes me. They'll come for her. Not because she's dangerous, but because she makes the past too loud to ignore." Tessa covered her mouth. Arya looked up and whispered, "Then I'll make it louder." 3 days passed. 3 days since Arya whispered about a woman no one had mentioned in 30 years. 3 days since she'd filled a notebook with drawings that only BlackSite archives could verify. And now she sat in silence, crayon in hand, eyes blank as the page in front of her. Jerome, watching from across the room, finally spoke. "Is she done?" Tessa shook her head. "No," she said softly. "She's listening." Arya's hand moved again. One line, then another. Shapes emerged. Not faces this time, not tunnels, blueprints, complex ones, coded systems layered over school maps, ventilation grids traced to hidden doors, old subway schematics, but repurposed. Jerome's breath caught in his throat. "This is Project Helix." Henry looked over his shoulder. "What the hell is that?" Jerome didn't answer right away. Then quietly he said, "It was the part of Echo we were never supposed to speak of." Back in Section 9, alarms began flashing. The general stood. She's accessing shadow layers. The younger officer blinked. What does that mean? It means she's not just unlocking her father's memories anymore, he snapped. She's decoding the ones they buried inside her. Tessa, furious, turned on Jerome. You told us Echo was a learning model, something experimental but safe. Why does a 6-year-old girl know classified infrastructure? Jerome didn't flinch. Because Daniel used Aria, not as a subject, but as a vault. Tessa stepped back like she'd been slapped. You're saying he hid secrets inside his own daughter? No, I'm saying he trusted her to survive. That night, Aria finally spoke again. She stood at the foot of the bed where Henry and Tessa sat, holding the old Hope doll like a holy relic. Her voice was small but unwavering. There's another place, below the reservoir. It's locked, but it knows me. Henry leaned forward. Knows you how? She looked at him, eyes impossibly old. It remembers me, before I was born. At dawn, they went. No press, no city officials, just Jerome's old van and a new map drawn in crayon. The reservoir loomed, glassy and still. To the world, it was a park. To Aria, it was a doorway. They followed her down a rusted service stairwell. Past vines, steel, concrete, and silence. Until they found it. A sealed hatch. No keypad, no handles. Just a single etched mark. The infinity symbol. Henry placed his hand on the metal. Nothing. Jerome tried his watch pin. Still nothing. Then Aria walked forward and placed Hope against it. The symbol pulsed. The hatch opened with a whisper, releasing air older than any of them. Inside, silence. Not empty, just waiting. A circular room, smooth walls, no wires, no screens. But at the center, a chair. And beside it, a glass pedestal holding a thin, blinking device. Tessa stared. It looked like a child's headset, but older, handcrafted, laced with tiny golden fibers. Is that? Jerome nodded. The prototype neural bridge. They said it was lost. Aria stepped toward it. Tessa rushed forward. Aria, no! But Aria didn't stop. She picked up the headset with both hands, looked at it like an old friend, and said, He told me it's mine. The moment she put it on, the room came alive. Walls pulsed, lights blinked. A low hum filled the air like a heartbeat returning. On every surface, images appeared, not on screens but in light itself. Footage, experiments, childhoods, cities, wars. And in all of them, Daniel Monroe. Laughing, crying, holding an infant. Is that me? Aria asked. No, Jerome whispered. That's you before. Then the room shifted. The images faded. And from the walls came a single voice. Not Daniel, but hers. Older, wiser. If you're hearing me, then memory has survived. I am Aria Monroe, and this is my echo. Everyone stood frozen. The voice continued. They erased the others, but I kept the echoes, in hope, in line, in blood. You must remember. Not just me, all of us. Because the system only wins if we forget. Aria's hands trembled. She took off the headset, and for the first time, she cried. Not because of pain, but because she recognized the voice, her future self. When the door opened in her mind, Arya did not flinch. She did not run. She did not scream. She simply stepped forward, into the light that smelled faintly of cedar and chalk, of Sunday mornings and soft songs without words. And there he was, Daniel Monroe. Not the fragmented version from old files or shaky footage, not the grieving scientist, not the ghost, just a man in a cardigan too big for him, sitting cross-legged on the floor of a memory that hadn't played in over a decade. He looked up. "Arya?" She nodded. "I'm here." And his face crumpled, not in fear, but in recognition. Outside the neural field, the storm raged. Jerome monitored vitals. Tessa held hope. Henry watched the hatch like a father waiting outside the maternity ward of time itself. Then the pulse monitors shifted, not spiking, not crashing, just aligning. Brainwaves syncing, not with the machine, but with each other. "She's stabilizing him," Jerome whispered. Henry blinked. "From inside?" "No," Jerome said, tears in his eyes. "From within herself." Inside the echo space, Daniel stood. "I didn't know if this would work," he said softly. "I left too much. Or maybe not enough." Arya reached out and took his hand. "You left hope." He laughed. "That old doll." She smiled. "No, hope. Not the toy. The word." They sat together on the ground of memory, and Daniel began to speak, not with data or formulas or warnings, but with stories. Of the day she was born, of how she once sneezed during a global conference and got applause, of the last lullaby he sang before they erased his name. One by one, the memories reattached, like constellations finding their stars again. And Arya, this little girl who remembered too much, just listened. Because she knew. You don't heal the world by correcting its data. You heal it by remembering who you are to someone. Outside, the countdown reached 0, but the breach never came. Because in that final moment, Echo didn't break. It became human. And the man with the static eyes, watching from the dark tower above the city, saw something he couldn't process. Love, unfiltered. Grief, forgiven. A child holding the truth not as a weapon, but as a bridge. He turned away, because in all his power, he had no answer for this. Back at the townhouse, Arya opened her eyes. Tears streaked her cheeks, but she was smiling. Henry rushed forward. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I found him." Tessa hugged her so tightly the world narrowed. Jerome wiped his eyes and said nothing, and Hope, the doll, blinked once, as if content to rest at last. The next morning, something strange happened. A file appeared on every major university server in the country. Unlabeled, just a title, "If We Forget Again." Inside, the story of Echo, the experiments, the children, the costs, and the names of those lost. Daniel Monroe's among them. No one knew who uploaded it, but every time someone tried to delete it, the file returned. Because Arya hadn't just shared data, she'd shared herself. 1 week later, a bronze plaque appeared in the town square. No ceremony, no speeches, just a simple inscription to the girl who remembered what we tried to forget and gave it back with grace.